Chapter 1. The Sales Pitch. Craig Sawyer had always thought the sound of her voice would be one of his favorite things. It used to calm him, that soft, lilting way Emily spoke when she was trying to make something sound gentle. But tonight, her tone reminded him of a real estate agent describing a condemned house with so much potential. They sat in their small apartment's living room, the one they'd spent 2 years decorating with thrifted furniture and soft yellow lighting. And Craig listened to his fiancée tell him how she wanted to experience her last chance for freedom. Her hands were clasped in front of her, eyes wide with what she probably thought was sincerity. Craig, I just think it would be healthy, she said. You know, before we tie the knot, I want to make sure we both go into this without curiosity hanging over us. Curiosity, he repeated. His voice was level, calm, a voice that didn't match the flickering storm behind his eyes. Yes. She smiled faintly, the way people do when they're sure they're being reasonable. I just think, if we're honest with each other, we'll be stronger for it. It's not about love, it's just experiences. He looked down at the engagement ring on her finger, the one he'd spent months paying off. A modest diamond, nothing extravagant, but real. Solid. Something meant to last. Experiences, he murmured again, as if the word itself might start making sense if he rolled it around enough. Emily leaned forward on the couch. I'm not saying I want to go crazy, Craig. It's just, my friends and I planned this bachelorette trip, and everyone keeps saying it's the last chance to have fun before marriage. You know how it is. He didn't answer. She continued, filling the silence with her own justification. I thought if we made it official, an open thing, just until the wedding, it would be fair. Honest. No secrets. You can, do the same. Craig stared at her like she was speaking a different language. You want to make it fair, he said finally, by making it even. Well, she said, smiling hopefully, yeah. Exactly. He leaned back against the couch, hands resting on his knees. The clock on the wall ticked. A car passed outside, its headlights sliding across the blinds and breaking the moment into light and shadow. So let me make sure I understand, Craig said slowly. You want to sleep with other people because it's fair. It's not about sex, she said quickly, cheeks flushing. It's about freedom. Closure, even. Just one last. He raised a hand gently. Emily, he said, you don't have to keep explaining, but I want you to understand. This isn't about not loving you, he smiled. The kind of smile that wasn't a smile at all. I get it, he said softly. You love me so much you need to go get screwed by someone else. I think Hallmark's been missing that one. Craig, no, really, he said, voice still calm, almost detached. That would make a hell of a greeting card. Her face crumpled slightly. Don't make this ugly. I'm trying to be honest with you. He looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, he saw her not as the woman he was going to marry, but as a stranger rehearsing lines for a part she didn't believe in. And just like that, something inside him went quiet. Have fun, he said finally. Really, I mean that. She blinked. That's it. He stood up, stretching a little, as though the conversation had been nothing more than a passing inconvenience. Yeah, that's it. The next morning, Emily left with her suitcase rolling behind her and a bright, airy smile. She kissed him on the cheek before jumping into the waiting Uber. I'll call you tonight, she said cheerfully. Craig watched her go from the window, the taillights of the car fading into the city's restless hum. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat in silence, letting the bitterness of it linger on his tongue. He thought about what she'd said, about freedom, about fairness, about honesty. And then, without really planning to, he decided he was done. By the time Emily returned from her trip 4 days later, the apartment was quiet, emptier than she'd left it. Craig's side of the closet was bare, his toothbrush gone, his laptop and camera missing from the desk. On the kitchen counter sat his apartment key, the engagement ring, and a note written in his clean, deliberate handwriting. I hope you enjoy your freedom. I've already canceled everything for the wedding. Later that day, her phone buzzed with messages from family, friends, coworkers, all reacting to the email Craig had sent to the entire guest list. The wedding has been canceled. The bride-to-be chose to pursue experiences with other men and was proud of it. Thank you for your understanding. Craig didn't stick around to watch the fallout. He packed his car and drove east, back to the small town where he'd grown up, where people still waved from their porches and time didn't feel like a race. He didn't look back once. His parents lived in the same two-story farmhouse they'd bought when Craig was 7. When he pulled into the gravel driveway, his mom came running out, arms open, hair still tied up from her gardening. Craig, she said, hugging him so tightly he almost laughed. Oh, honey, we didn't expect you so soon. He smiled faintly. Yeah, plans changed. His father appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. Didn't think we'd see you back in these parts unless someone paid you. Guess the city ran out of checks, Craig said. They didn't press him for details, not yet, anyway. His mother just patted his arm and said, well, you're home now. We'll figure the rest out later. For the first few days, Craig did nothing but sleep and walk. The air was quiet here, real quiet, the kind that wraps around you instead of chasing you down. No car horns, no thin apartment walls, no constant reminders that life is supposed to be louder, faster, better. He worked remotely for a telecommunications company, mostly handling system diagnostics and the occasional on-site repair at local businesses. The work was steady, simple, and, for the first time in years, he didn't hate it. One Friday afternoon, he was grabbing lunch downtown when he heard someone call his name. Craig Sawyer? Is that you? He turned, and there they were, Three of his old high school buddies sitting at an outdoor table, half a dozen beer bottles already open between them. Holy hell, look who it is, one of them, Mike shouted. The big city man himself. Craig laughed and joined them. It didn't take long before the conversation flowed like it used to. Easy, unforced. They caught up, told stories, laughed about the stupid things they used to do. It felt like slipping into an old jacket and realizing it still fit. And that was when he saw her. Across the street, stepping out of the small bookstore with a tote bag over her shoulder and that unmistakable strawberry blonde hair glinting in the sunlight. Shiela Parker. Craig's heart stuttered in his chest. Sixth grade came flooding back. The science fair where she'd smiled at him once and he'd forgotten how to speak. The way her laugh had lived in his head for months after graduation. She was older now, of course. Everyone was. But still had that same warmth about her, like she carried her own quiet light. Hey, Mike said, following his gaze. You just seeing Shiela? She's back in town, too. Been helping your sister with some kind of school fundraiser. Craig blinked. My sister? Yeah, Mike said, grinning. They're like best friends now. Craig groaned softly and leaned back in his chair. Oh, perfect. Just what I needed. Mike laughed. You look like a man seeing a ghost. More like a memory that can walk and talk, Craig muttered. Come on, Mike teased. You finally talked to her this time. Were you going to stand there and let your brain melt again? Craig smirked. We'll see. He watched Shiela walk away down the street, sunlight catching in her hair, and for the first time in a long time, something inside him stirred, not the ache of what he'd lost, but the faint hum of possibility. Chapter 2. The Awkward Reunion. The Saturday morning sun poured through the kitchen window, painting soft rectangles of gold across the Sawyer family's old wooden table. Craig sat there with a mug of coffee and his laptop open, reviewing a list of network diagnostics for a client 2 towns over. His mother shuffled around behind him, humming faintly as she made pancakes. You're looking more alive lately, she said. Colors coming back to your face. Craig smiled faintly without looking up. Yes, fresh air does that. It's more than that, she said knowingly. Sometimes you have to come home to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. He looked up at her kind, lined face, and felt something ease inside him. You sound like one of those inspirational posters, he said. She laughed. Well, someone's got to balance out your sarcasm. Before he could respond, the sound of the back door opening broke through the quiet, followed by a familiar voice. Hey, Mrs. Sawyer. I brought those books you wanted. Craig froze, mid-sip. That voice. His mother brightened immediately. Shiela, sweetheart. Come in, come in. Craig slowly turned in his chair. And there she was, standing in the doorway, tote bag over her shoulder, her hair tied back loosely but with a few strands framing her face. That strawberry blonde halo hit the morning light just right, and Craig's heart decided to betray him all over again. Morning, she said, smiling at Mrs. Sawyer before noticing him. Oh, Craig. Hi. He set down his coffee mug carefully, as if one wrong move might shatter it. Hey, Shiela. Long time. Yeah, she said, shifting her weight a little. Like, what, 10 years? Something like that, he said. You look well. You too, she said, smiling, and then, after a pause, I didn't know you were back. Just got in last week. Mrs. Sawyer clapped her hands together. Oh, this is perfect. Sheila's been helping your sister organize the community fundraiser next weekend. Fundraiser? Craig asked. Yeah, Shiela said, a little sheepish. Your sister roped me into it. She said she needed someone responsible to balance her chaos. Craig smirked. Sounds about right. Mrs. Sawyer excused herself to water her plants, clearly pleased with the reunion she'd just orchestrated. The kitchen fell into an awkward but not entirely uncomfortable silence. Craig gestured toward the table. You want some coffee? Sure, Shiela said, setting her bag down and taking a seat. Thanks. He poured her a cup and slid it across the table, careful not to look too long at her hands or her eyes. So, she said after a moment, what brings you back? City life not all it's cracked up to be. Craig gave a small laugh. You could say that. She tilted her head, sensing there was more to it, but too polite to ask. Well, the town's happy to have another familiar face. It's weird how many people drift away and never come back. He nodded. Yeah, guess I'm one of the strays that wandered home. She smiled at that, and for a moment, it felt like they'd slipped back into something simple. Easy. Then his sister's voice came shouting from the front door. Mom. Shiela. You guys here? Kitchen. Mrs. Sawyer called back from the garden. Craig's sister, Beth, came barreling in with her usual whirlwind energy, brown curls bouncing, phone in one hand, half a muffin in the other. She stopped short when she saw Craig. Well, look who finally crawled out of bed. Good morning to you too, Craig said dryly. Beth grinned and flung her arms around him. It's good to have you home, big brother. Even if I am mostly here for the free Wi-Fi, he teased. Exactly, she said, then looked between him and Shiela. Oh good, you two met. I was going to introduce you properly, but, you know, Craig raised an eyebrow. Properly? I've known Shiela since middle school. Yeah, Shiela said with a laugh. But that was pre-adulthood. We're all different people now. Beth smirked. You two can be different people while helping me set up banners at the school gym today. Wait, Craig said, frowning. You're recruiting me too? Beth blinked innocently. You have 2 working hands, don't you? Come on, it'll be fun. Fun, Craig repeated flatly. Shiela tried not to smile. Could be worse. Yeah, he said. Could be raining. The high school gym hadn't changed much since Craig had last set foot in it. The smell of old varnish and floor polish hit him the second he walked in, along with the faint echo of sneakers squeaking on hardwood. Beth directed from the bleachers like a general commanding her troops. Banners go over the stage, tables along the wall, and don't let me catch anyone using duct tape on paint again. Craig rolled his eyes as he climbed a ladder, holding one end of a banner while Sheila held the other. She's really in her element, he said. Always has been, Sheila replied, tugging the banner straight. Remember her 8th grade science fair meltdown? Craig laughed. When she yelled at the judges for not understanding her volcano project? Yeah, hard to forget. They both laughed, and for a moment the space between them softened. The sound echoed off the gym walls, warm and genuine. So, Sheila said, after the laughter faded, you ever think about settling back here for good? He paused mid-knot. Didn't plan on it. But maybe. Not a bad maybe, she said. Craig tied the banner's last corner and stepped down from the ladder. You still in town? He asked. Yeah. I teach art at the elementary school, she said. Moved back 3 years ago to take care of my dad when he got sick. Ended up staying. He nodded. I'm sorry. I didn't know. It's okay, she said softly. He's doing better now. They worked in companionable silence for a while, setting up tables and folding chairs. Every so often, Craig caught her looking at him, not in the flirty, polished way Emily used to, but in that quiet, observant way people do when they're curious about what's behind someone's eyes. When they finished, Beth clapped her hands. Perfect. Lunch break. The three of them sat on the bleachers with sandwiches from the cafe down the street. Craig bit into his turkey sandwich and listened as the two women talked about school fundraisers, art projects, and bake sales. The easy rhythm between them made him smile. At one point, Sheila glanced over at him. So, how's life treating you? Really? He hesitated. Complicated. That's an honest answer. Yeah, he said. My fiancée and I called things off. Sheila's expression softened. I'm sorry. He shrugged. Don't be. It was mutual, in a way. She wanted freedom. I decided to give it to her. Sheila studied him for a long moment. That sounds like it hurt. He didn't deny it. It did. But mostly, it just clarified things. Like what? That I don't want to build my life around someone who's still looking for exits. She nodded slowly, her gaze steady on him. That's a good line. Yeah, he said with a faint smile. Might put it on a t-shirt. Beth groaned. You two are getting deep again, aren't you? Can we not have therapy hour over sandwiches? Sheila laughed. Sorry, counselor's instinct. Counselor? Craig asked. Art teacher/guidance counselor, she said. Small town schools like to double up. He chuckled. You always were the type to help people fix things. Except for myself, she said lightly, but there was a shadow in her tone he didn't miss. Guess that makes two of us, he replied. They looked at each other then. Really looked, and something unspoken passed between them. Not romantic yet, not even flirtation. Just two people who had both learned how fragile plans could be. That night, back in his old room, Craig lay awake staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead. He thought about Sheila, the easy laughter, the quiet empathy in her voice, the way she made the air around her feel lighter. And he thought about Emily, about the noise, the sales pitch disguised as honesty, the emptiness that followed. He realized, for the first time in a long while, that he didn't feel bitter anymore. Just open. Tentative, but open. Maybe his grandfather had been right. You can accept people for who they are, or be constantly disappointed. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to start accepting himself, too. Chapter 3. Echoes. The next few weeks passed in a kind of gentle rhythm Craig hadn't felt in years. His mornings started with coffee and remote work in his parents' sunlit kitchen, followed by the occasional service call around town for his telecom job. Evenings were quieter, sometimes spent helping his dad fix the old riding mower, sometimes catching up with friends over beer and small-town gossip. And more often than not, he found himself crossing paths with Sheila. It started casually. A run-in at the cafe, a quick wave at the hardware store, then a since we're both here, lunch that turned into a habit neither of them wanted to break. Before long, it wasn't coincidence, it was comfort. On a Thursday afternoon, Craig stopped by the elementary school to check a down network line. Sheila was there, seated cross-legged on the floor with a dozen kids finger-painting around her. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, a streak of blue paint on her cheek. He leaned on the doorway, smiling. Looks like chaos in its purest form. She looked up, eyes lighting when she saw him. Hey, we call it creative learning. Thank you very much. One of the kids pointed at Craig. Who's that? That, Sheila said with a grin, is the internet man. He makes sure your cartoons actually load when you're supposed to be doing math. The room erupted in laughter. Craig chuckled, kneeling beside her to check the outlet. Good to know my legacy lives on in buffering screens. When the kids left for recess, she helped him coil the last of his cables. Their shoulders brushed, and neither of them moved away. Want to grab coffee? She asked. He hesitated for half a second before saying, yeah, I'd like that. They sat at the corner table of the local cafe, their conversation meandering from small talk to bigger things, her art students, his freelance clients, how the town still shut down by 9. Eventually, Sheila leaned back and asked quietly, you talked to her at all? Your ex? Craig stared into his coffee for a moment. No, haven't heard from her since I left. Do you want to? He thought about it. No, I think I said everything I needed to. Sheila nodded, studying him with that gentle curiosity again. You seem calmer than I expected. Anger takes energy, he said. I ran out of that a while ago. There was something about the way she looked at him then, like she saw the spaces between his words and understood them anyway. That night, his phone buzzed just after 11:30. A number he hadn't seen in weeks. Emily, hey, can we talk? Please. Craig stared at the message for a long time. Then the phone buzzed again. Emily, I got back to the apartment and it's so empty. I didn't realize how much I'd miss you. He set the phone down on his nightstand and turned off the light. Sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, he found himself sitting on the porch steps with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the cornfields. His dad stepped out, mug in hand, and sat beside him. Couldn't sleep? His dad asked. Craig shook his head. Old ghosts. Ah, his dad said. They always find the door cracked open. Craig smiled faintly. She texted last night. Did you answer? No. Good, his dad said simply. If you leave a wound alone, it scars. Keep picking at it, and it just stays raw. Craig let that sink in. Later that afternoon, he was helping Sheila set up the art booth for the town's annual summer fair. She was arranging watercolor pieces on wire stands while he hammered down a loose tent pole. You okay? She asked without looking up. You seem distracted. He hesitated. Emily texted me last night. She froze for half a second, then nodded slowly. What did she say? That she missed me. And I didn't answer. Do you want to? He took a breath. Part of me does. The part that hates unfinished stories. But another part knows it's better to leave some chapters closed. Sheila smiled softly. That's growth. I don't know if it's growth or just exhaustion. Either way, it's peace. They stood there for a moment, the fairgrounds quiet except for the sound of distant laughter and the hum of cicadas. Sheila turned to face him fully, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. You deserve peace, Craig. You really do. He looked at her, the sunlight glinting off the strands of her hair, and for a second, he wanted to say something that would tip the balance between them, something honest and terrifying. But before he could, his phone buzzed again. This time a call. Emily. Sheila noticed the name flashing on the screen. She stepped back slightly, giving him space. You should take it, she said quietly. Closure matters. Craig hesitated, then hit accept. Hello. The voice on the other end was softer than he remembered. Craig. I didn't think you'd pick up. Neither did I, he said. A pause. Then, God, I know I messed up. I was stupid. I thought I needed to feel something before settling down, and all I did was realize how much I threw away. He said nothing. I came back and saw the note, she continued. I deserved it. But please, Craig, I need to see you. Just once. To explain. Explain what? He asked. His voice was calm, almost detached. You already did that when you told me you wanted freedom. It wasn't like that, she said quickly. It was supposed to be harmless. Just fun. Everyone said it was normal. Normal, he interrupted. Right. She faltered. I didn't sleep with anyone. Not really. Not really, he echoed, a bitter laugh slipping out. You either did or you didn't, Emily. There was silence on the line. Then a quiet, broken, I did. Once. I thought if I got it out of my system, I could come back ready to be your wife. But when I came home and you were gone, I realized I'd lost the only thing that mattered. He exhaled slowly. Emily, you didn't lose me because of what you did. You lost me because of why you did it. You thought love was something you could measure against curiosity. She started to cry softly. I just want a chance to fix it. He looked across the field, where Sheila stood pretending to rearrange canvases, though her eyes flickered toward him now and then. I don't think it's something that can be fixed, he said finally. Not because I hate you, but because I don't trust who you were when you made that choice. And I can't marry someone I have to doubt. Craig, please, goodbye, Emily. He ended the call. He stood there for a moment, staring at the phone, feeling an odd mixture of sadness and relief. Sheila walked over, her voice soft. You okay? He nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I finally am. Want to talk about it? He shook his head. No need. I said what I should have said months ago. She smiled faintly. Then maybe now you can start saying what you want to say. He glanced at her, curiosity tugging at the corners of his mouth. And what do you think that is? She shrugged. I'll let you figure that out. That evening, the fairgrounds came alive with lights and music. Craig and Sheila walked along the rows of booths, laughing at the kids running around with cotton candy and glow sticks. The air smelled of popcorn and fried dough and summer nostalgia. They stopped by the lake just beyond the fair, where the noise faded into a distant hum. Fireflies danced over the water. Sheila slipped off her sandals, digging her toes into the cool grass. You know, she said, I used to come here after my dad's chemo sessions. Sit by the lake and just breathe. He looked at her, seeing her differently now, not just as the girl from his past, but as someone who'd quietly fought her own battles. You've always been stronger than you let on. She smiled. And you're stronger than you think. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of things unsaid, of the simple fact that neither of them needed to fill it. He turned toward her. Sheila. She met his gaze, eyes soft. Yeah, thank you for reminding me what real peace feels like. She smiled gently. You don't have to thank me, Craig. Just don't forget it. He didn't answer, just looked out over the lake, the reflection of fair lights shimmering on the water. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He was thinking about what might come next. Chapter 4. The turning point. The fair had come and gone, leaving behind only the scent of fried dough and the faint echo of laughter carried on the summer breeze. The lake, quiet now, reflected a sky stretched wide with stars. Craig found himself there again 2 nights later, sitting on the same worn wooden bench where he and Sheila had talked. He hadn't planned on coming back, but something about that place pulled at him. Maybe the silence, maybe the memory of her voice mingling with the sound of the water. He didn't have to wonder long. A familiar pair of footsteps crunched over the gravel behind him. "Guess I'm not the only one who likes this spot," Sheila said, smiling as she walked up. Craig looked over his shoulder. "You stalking me, Parker?" "Please," she said, sitting down beside him. "You're way too easy to find. Small town perks." He chuckled. "Fair enough." They sat side by side, the lake shimmering in the moonlight. For a while, neither spoke. The quiet between them was easy now, a shared silence, not an awkward one. "How'd the cleanup go?" he asked finally. Sheila sighed dramatically. "Let's just say the art booth now smells permanently of lemonade and glitter glue. But the kids were happy, so I'll call it a win." He smiled. "You always did have the patience of a saint." "I have my moments," she said, nudging him lightly with her shoulder. "How about you? Any ghosts text you again?" He shook his head. "No. I think Emily finally realized silence is an answer." "Good," she said softly. "You deserve a clean slate." He looked at her then, really looked. The soft way the moonlight touched her hair, the small lines that formed at the corners of her eyes when she smiled, the quiet steadiness about her that made him feel like the ground under his feet wasn't shifting anymore. "You ever think about how life circles back?" he asked. She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I spent years chasing the idea of what I thought happiness was. Success, stability, a picture-perfect life with someone who looked good beside me. And now, sitting here, I realize I was happier back when I had none of that." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the trick. You stop chasing things when you realize the best ones don't need chasing." Craig let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "You always were better at this wisdom thing than me." "Not wisdom," she said, gazing out at the lake. "Just a lot of mistakes." He glanced at her. "Anyone special who left their mark?" She smiled wryly. "A few, but none that lasted. Some people fit into your story for a chapter, not the whole book." "I get that," he said quietly. "I think I finally learned it." They fell silent again, the sound of crickets rising around them. Sheila pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them, her gaze drifting across the water. "You ever feel like you spent so long waiting to be loved right that you forgot how to just be?" Craig turned to face her. "Yeah," he said. "All the time." When she looked back at him, something shifted, small, almost imperceptible, but real. The kind of moment where the air feels heavier because both people suddenly realize there's more in it than before. Her eyes met his, steady and searching. "You make it easy to talk, Craig." "That's a first," he said, smiling. "I used to be the quiet kid who couldn't say 2 words without tripping over them." "I remember," she said softly. "You were shy, sweet. Always looked like you had something to say, but didn't know how. And now you look like you know exactly what you want to say," she murmured. He swallowed, feeling the pulse quicken in his throat. "Maybe I do." The silence stretched, a breath away from something neither could undo. Then Sheila whispered, "Say it." He leaned in just enough for his voice to fall low. "I don't want to miss this. Whatever this is." She smiled faintly, her breath catching. "Then don't." Craig reached up, hesitating for a fraction of a second before brushing a strand of hair away from her face. His fingers grazed her cheek, warm against her skin. And when she didn't pull back, when she looked up at him like she'd been waiting for that touch, he closed the last inch between them. The kiss wasn't dramatic or rushed. It wasn't fireworks or background music. It was quiet, steady, and completely real, like something that had been waiting years for the right moment to arrive. When they finally pulled apart, Sheila's forehead rested lightly against his. "You realize," she whispered, "you just kissed your sister's best friend." Craig laughed softly, the sound muffled between them. "Guess I'll have to live with the scandal." She smiled. "Beth's going to have a field day." "Let her," he said. "For once, I don't care what anyone thinks." They sat there in the stillness that followed, her hand resting in his. The world around them seemed softer somehow, like the edges had been blurred. The next morning, he woke up feeling lighter. He spent the day working on a service call for a farm outside town, fixing a faulty connection in a dusty old barn. But every now and then, he caught himself smiling at nothing, remembering the lake, the kiss, the quiet certainty that followed. When he finished the job, he texted Sheila. "Craig, you free tonight?" "Sheila, depends. You planning to break more small-town taboos?" "Craig, only if you're my accomplice." "Sheila, then I'm in." They met at the diner just outside town, the one with the neon sign that flickered half the letters out. Over greasy fries and milkshakes, they talked like old friends and new lovers at once. She teased him for still overanalyzing everything, and he teased her for dipping fries in ice cream. "Don't knock it till you try it," she said, pushing the milkshake toward him. He made a face but humored her, dipping a fry and taking a bite. Then paused. "Okay, that's actually not bad." She grinned. "Told you." Craig leaned back in the booth, watching her laugh, feeling something bloom quietly inside him. Not infatuation, not rebound affection, but genuine warmth. The kind that settled deep instead of burning bright and fast. After dinner, they walked outside, the night cool and clear. The parking lot was half empty, the sound of crickets filling the space between words. Sheila stopped beside her car, turning to him. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked softly. "For what?" "For something new. For us." He thought about it. about the weight of everything behind him, about how easy it would be to rush or second guess. Then he stepped closer, his hand finding hers. Yeah, he said quietly. I'm sure. She smiled. Good. He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. When they broke apart, she whispered. You really are different now. Maybe, he said. Or maybe I just finally found someone who sees me the way I actually am. Her eyes softened. Then don't disappear this time. I'm not going anywhere. That night, as Craig drove home, the small town lights fading behind him, he felt something he hadn't in years. Not the thrill of escape, not the ache of regret. Just a quiet, certain peace. Life hadn't turned out the way he planned. But maybe that was the point. Some endings weren't failures. They were just doorways to the right story. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid to walk through. Chapter 5. Crossroads. Autumn had settled over the town like a quilt, the hills painted in shades of copper and ember, the air carrying that faint crispness that hinted at winter. Craig's life had fallen into an easy rhythm. He'd rented a small house on the edge of town, just a few streets from Sheila's. His remote work for the telecom company was steady, and he'd even started volunteering at the elementary school once a week, helping Sheila's students with small tech projects. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the dream he'd once imagined for himself. But it was good. Simple good. On Saturday mornings, they'd walk to the farmer's market. She'd buy fresh flowers she never actually put in water, and he'd make fun of her for it. On Sundays, she'd paint in his living room while he fixed things that didn't need fixing. It felt easy. It felt right. Until the email arrived. Craig was at his desk late one Thursday night when it came through, a message from his regional supervisor. He clicked it open absently, halfway through his cup of coffee. Subject: New contract opportunity, San Francisco Division. Craig, your name came up during internal discussions for the new lead technician position at our San Francisco office. It's a significant promotion, higher pay, relocation support, and leadership potential. Let me know by the end of next week if you're interested. Robert Hayes. Craig leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. San Francisco, the city he'd once dreamed of, the one he'd left behind when everything fell apart. He sat there for a long time, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Sheila was waiting at his place when he got home from a service call the next afternoon. She was curled up on his couch, sketchbook open, one of his old sweatshirts hanging loosely on her shoulders. He loved that she made herself at home here, that she didn't ask permission. Hey, she said, smiling when she saw him. You look like you've been thinking too much. He kissed the top of her head before sinking into the couch beside her. Maybe I have. Something wrong. He hesitated. Got an email last night. A job offer. Promotion. San Francisco. Her pen still midline. Oh, yeah. It's the big opportunity. I'll bet, she said softly, closing the sketchbook. Do you want it? Craig exhaled slowly. That's the thing. A few years ago, I would have jumped at it without thinking. But now, he trailed off, meeting her eyes. Now I don't know. She nodded, her expression calm, but her voice quiet. Well, that's not a bad thing, Craig. It just means your life's different now. He reached for her hand. You are my life now. She smiled faintly, but there was something in her eyes, not sadness exactly, but thoughtfulness. Don't say that like it's supposed to make you stay. He frowned. I didn't mean, I know, she interrupted gently. But if you stay, it should be because you want this life. Not because you think you owe it to me. Craig was quiet for a long moment. You think I'd regret staying? I think you might regret not deciding, she said. There's a difference. He nodded, but the words sat heavy in his chest. For the next few days, he tried to focus on work, on ordinary things, fixing routers, answering calls, pretending the question wasn't sitting on his shoulder every hour of the day. Sheila didn't bring it up again. She just kept showing up, morning coffee, late night walks, the steady rhythm of someone who didn't need to fill silence with worry. And maybe that's what made it harder. On Tuesday, Craig was driving back from a job outside town when he stopped at a red light and saw her, Emily, standing on the sidewalk, holding a cardboard box, her hair shorter now, but unmistakably her. She looked up just as the light changed, her eyes meeting his through the windshield. He froze. So did she. Then she smiled faintly, hesitant, and gave a small wave. Craig didn't wave back. He just drove. That night, the knock came. When he opened the door, she was there, that same box now sitting at her feet. Hi, she said softly. Emily, he said, voice low. What are you doing here? I moved back, she said. For work. The new regional branch office opened up last month. They hired me as a project manager. He exhaled slowly. That's something. I wanted to call, she said. But I figured showing up unannounced was less cowardly. Craig crossed his arms. Depends on the definition of brave. She smiled faintly. I deserve that. Yeah, he said. You did. Emily's expression softened. You look good, Craig. Happier. I am. Her eyes flickered, a hint of pain beneath the surface. With her. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. I'm glad, she said after a moment. You deserve that. Then she hesitated. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for what I did. I've already said that, but for what it made you think about yourself. You were always enough. I just wasn't. He stood there for a long moment, the chill autumn air curling between them. Thank you, he said finally, for saying that. She smiled faintly, and then she left. When he told Sheila later, she didn't react with jealousy or anger. She just listened. She came back. Sheila asked quietly. Yeah, says it's for work. And how do you feel about that? Mostly nothing, he admitted. Just closure, I guess. Sheila smiled. That's good. You deserve that, too. But later, when she thought he wasn't watching, he caught her staring out the window, quiet, pensive, like someone thinking about what closure means when life keeps moving forward. The week after, Craig got the final email from corporate. Craig, just checking in. Are you still considering the San Francisco position? Deadline's Friday. Friday. He stared at the screen for a long time, heart split between two places, one that held his past ambitions, and one that held everything that felt like home. That night, he went to see Sheila. She was at her studio, painting under the soft hum of a single lamp. Music played low in the background, something slow and old, full of ache. She looked up when he entered. Hey, you look like a man carrying too many decisions. Story of my life, he said quietly. He walked over, hands in his pockets, eyes on the half-finished canvas, a skyline fading into an open field. City and countryside, meeting but never quite blending. That's beautiful, he said. Still working on where they meet? She replied. He smiled faintly. Yeah, me too. She set her brush down and turned to him. You have to go, don't you? I don't have to. But you want to, she said gently. You wouldn't be torn if part of you didn't. He stepped closer, voice low. What if I told you I want both? The life here and what's out there. She looked up at him, eyes steady. Then figure out which one will still love you when the other's gone. He reached for her hand. You would. Her lips trembled into a sad smile. I would. But that doesn't mean you should ask me to. Craig felt the words catch in his throat. I don't want to lose you. Then don't, she whispered. Just don't lose yourself, either. The space between them filled with all the things they weren't saying, love, fear, inevitability. Then she kissed him, not softly this time, but with all the urgency of someone memorizing what they might have to let go of. When she pulled back, her voice broke just a little. Whatever you choose, Craig, just don't make it out of guilt. He touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away the streak of paint near her jaw. I won't. But when he walked out into the night, he wasn't sure if that was true. Chapter 6. The choice. Craig barely remembered the drive home that night. The road stretched in long, dark ribbons, the headlights carving tunnels through the mist. He rolled the window down halfway, hoping the cold air would clear the fog in his head. It didn't. Every word Sheila had said echoed like a drumbeat. Figure out which one will still love you when the other's gone. When he pulled into his driveway, the house looked unfamiliar, the porch light flickering weakly, the window curtains drawn. For the first time since he'd moved back, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a waiting room. He sat there in the driver's seat long after the engine died, his hands gripping the steering wheel, the weight of two possible futures pressing on him from opposite sides. San Francisco. Sheila. Dreams. Reality. He knew he couldn't have both. By morning, he still hadn't slept. The coffee in his mug had gone cold twice before he gave up pretending to work. The blinking cursor on his monitor stared back, merciless. Finally, he opened his email. The message from Robert was still there, polite, expectant, full of words like opportunity and advancement. He started typing, then stopped, deleted, typed again. Hell, he muttered under his breath. Before he could overthink it further, his phone buzzed. Mom, brunch today? Your dad made pancakes. He stared at the message for a second, then typed back. Craig, be there in 20. His parents' house looked the same as it always had. The white siding slightly weathered, the old oak tree leaning over the front walk like an aging guardian. Inside, the smell of coffee and butter filled the air. His mother was at the stove, flipping pancakes, while his father read the paper at the kitchen table. Morning, sweetheart, his mom said without looking up. You look tired. Didn't sleep much, he admitted, sliding into a chair. His dad lowered the paper just enough to give him a knowing look. Work or women? Craig half smiled. Both. His father said, folding the paper neatly. That old combination. His mom turned, spatula in hand. What's going on? He hesitated. I got offered a promotion. In San Francisco. Her eyes lit up. That's wonderful. Maybe, he said. But it would mean moving. Again. His father leaned back in his chair, studying him. And what's keeping you here? Craig hesitated. Sheila. That one word hung in the air like a truth too heavy to set down. His mother smiled softly. She's a lovely girl. She is, Craig said. But I don't know if staying means giving up something I've worked for, or finally realizing what actually matters. His dad nodded slowly. You ever hear that story your grandfather used to tell about the train station? Craig frowned. Can't say I remember. He said life's a lot like standing on a platform, his father said. Two trains pull up. One's heading somewhere you've dreamed of all your life. The other's going somewhere that just feels like home. The trick is, neither one waits forever. You have to decide which kind of happiness you're willing to risk missing. Craig stared at the table. And if you pick wrong? His father shrugged. Then you live with it. That's part of being alive. His mom slid a plate of pancakes in front of him, warm and golden. Whatever you choose, honey, make sure it's a decision you can live with, not one you can explain. Craig looked down at the plate, the smell of syrup rising between them. Simple, comforting, real. For a moment, he envied how easy it looked to have built a life that didn't need to be proven. That afternoon, he drove out to the lake. The same bench where he and Sheila had first reconnected sat under a maple tree shedding its last leaves. He sat there for a long time, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the ripples move across the water. When his phone buzzed, he didn't need to look to know who it was. Sheila, hey, you okay? He typed back slowly. Craig, yeah? Thinking. Wanna meet? Sheila, the lake? Craig, you read my mind. She arrived 20 minutes later, bundled in a gray coat, her hair pulled up messily under a knit hat. "Hey," she said softly, sitting beside him. "You look like someone who's been fighting ghosts." "Feels like it," he said with a small smile. "Didn't know there were this many in one town." She laughed faintly. "You'd be surprised." They sat quietly for a while, the sound of the wind filling the spaces between them. Finally, he said, "I talked to my parents this morning." "Oh, they think it's a good opportunity. Are they wrong?" He shook his head. "No, but I think they can tell I'm not sure it's my opportunity anymore." Sheila nodded, her gaze on the water. "It's okay to change your mind about what you want." He turned toward her. "Even if it means staying in a place you once couldn't wait to leave." She smiled softly. "Especially then. It means you finally stopped running long enough to realize what matters." Craig exhaled. "When I left the city, I told myself I was coming home to lick my wounds, not to rebuild my life. But somehow it happened anyway. You happened." She met his eyes. "Craig," he held up a hand. "Let me finish before I overthink this again. I've spent years chasing an idea, success, ambition, validation. But none of that ever made me happy. You do. This place does. I don't want to leave that behind." Her eyes shimmered, and she let out a shaky laugh. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I already wrote back," he said quietly. "Told them no. I'm staying." She blinked. "You did?" He nodded. "This morning, before I came here." For a moment, she just looked at him, searching his face for any trace of hesitation. Finding none, she reached out and took his hand, her fingers cold but sure. "Are you sure?" she whispered. He smiled. For the first time in a long time. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. "You're either brave or crazy. Maybe both." Then she kissed him, slow, grateful, full of all the quiet things words couldn't say. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, "You know your sister's going to lose her mind when she finds out we're serious now." He laughed softly. "That's fine. I'll let her yell, and then I'll remind her I'm the older brother. You're impossible, and you love me for it." She smiled. "Yeah, I do." The following week, Craig got a reply from Robert. Short and polite. "Understood. Wishing you the best, Craig. You were one of the good ones." He read it twice, then closed his laptop. No second thoughts. No regret. That night, he and Sheila hosted dinner for his sister Beth and her boyfriend. The table was too small, the food slightly burned, and Beth did, in fact, yell when she found out about them. Then she hugged Sheila and muttered, "You better not hurt my brother." To which Sheila smirked and said, "He's safe." And just like that, everything felt right again. Later, when the dishes were done and the laughter had faded, Craig stood on the porch with Sheila, the night spread out before them. "You know," she said, leaning against the railing, "you could have had a fancy office, a skyline view, probably a salary that didn't require counting coffee refills." He smiled. "Yeah, but then I'd miss this." "This?" "You," he said. "The noise of this town. The lake. The way my mom still thinks pancakes solve everything." She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. "You really don't miss the city?" "Not even a little." They stood there a while longer, the autumn air cool against their skin. Somewhere in the distance, the train tracks hummed, faint, steady, like the echo of a choice made and settled. Craig listened, then smiled faintly. "Guess I picked my train." Sheila looked up. And it's right where I'm supposed to be." Chapter 7. Storm clouds. The first snow hadn't arrived yet, but the air carried the sharp bite of early winter. Craig and Sheila had spent the day clearing leaves from the yard, laughing at how much more effective they were as a team than they'd ever imagined. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and apple. Sheila was baking pies for the town holiday fair, and Craig was pretending to supervise while secretly sampling dough. "Stop licking the spoon," she said, swatting his hand. "We've got a dozen pies to make." He grinned. "I'm quality control. Somebody has to ensure they're edible." "You're impossible," she said, shaking her head, though the smile never left her face. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of life Craig had once thought impossible for himself. Small town, steady work, and someone beside him who understood his rhythm, his silences, his laughter. The knock came in the late afternoon, sharp enough to make both of them jump. Craig wiped his hands on a towel and opened the door. Standing there was a woman in a long coat, her hair dark and wind-tossed, eyes sharp and deliberate. "Craig Sawyer?" she asked. "Yes," he said cautiously. "Can I help you?" She held up a badge. "Detective Callahan. I need to ask you some questions about a series of telecom fraud incidents. We understand you work for the company handling these networks." Craig felt a chill run down his spine. I do. What kind of incidents?" "Unauthorized access to corporate networks, equipment tampering, and fraudulent line installations. It's been traced back to your region. We just need a statement from you." He nodded slowly. "I understand. Can we talk inside?" Sheila stepped closer, her hand finding his. "Everything okay?" He gave her a small, reassuring squeeze. "Yes, it's just work-related." But even as he said it, a tight knot formed in his stomach. Detective Callahan went through the questions professionally but firmly. Craig answered honestly, detailing his recent service calls, customer accounts, and any irregularities he'd noticed. By the time she left, he felt drained, his hands trembling slightly. Sheila stayed with him in the living room, silent but present. "You okay?" she asked softly. Craig exhaled slowly. "Yeah, I just didn't expect this." They asked about Emily too. Apparently, someone reported suspicious activity connected to her branch office. Her eyes widened. Emily. Craig nodded. Yeah, I think someone thought she might be involved. She's not, obviously, but it means she could end up in the investigation anyway. And that complicates things. Sheila didn't respond immediately. She just sat beside him, hand in his, thumb brushing his knuckles. We'll handle it, she said finally. Like we always do. Craig wanted to believe that, wanted to anchor himself in the warmth of her hand, but a voice in the back of his head whispered doubts he hadn't heard in months. Everything's too easy. Something's coming to test it. That night, after Sheila had gone home, Craig couldn't shake the tension. He sat at his desk, going over service records and emails, trying to reassure himself that nothing was wrong. The phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. Craig Sawyer. Yes. Emily, the voice said. Calm, deliberate. We need to talk. It's important. Craig felt his stomach drop. Now's not a good time. I'm busy. This isn't something that can wait, she said, and he could hear the urgency in her voice. It's about the investigation. Something came up, and I need your help to clear it up before it escalates. Craig rubbed his face. Fine. Meet me at the office in an hour. The next morning, Craig met Emily at a small cafe near her office. She looked tired, more serious than he'd ever seen her, and her hands fidgeted with the coffee cup in front of her. Talk, he said, voice flat but calm. Emily exhaled sharply. Someone's using my office network to access telecom accounts. They've traced it to someone near your region, and I got worried. I didn't know who else to trust. Craig frowned. So you came to me? Yeah, I know how careful you are. I figured if anyone could track this without causing a scene, it'd be you. He sighed. This is messy, but I'll help. I just need the records and a list of all accounts that showed irregularities. She slid a folder across the table. Everything I have. And Craig, I trust you to keep this quiet. I will, he said. But this could take some time. Emily nodded, her eyes briefly meeting his with a mix of relief and something heavier. Something that lingered between apology and connection. He didn't answer, only nodded, turning his attention to the papers. That evening, he returned to Sheila's with the folder in hand. You look exhausted, she said, pulling him in for a hug. I am, he admitted. It's complicated. Emily's back in town, and there's some sort of investigation. I can't talk about it, but it might take my focus away for a bit. Sheila didn't flinch. She just held him tighter. We'll get through it. Together. Craig pressed his forehead against hers, feeling the warmth and steadiness she offered. I don't want anything to mess this up. Not us. She smiled faintly. Nothing will. I trust you. And I trust us. The next week was a blur. Craig worked late nights, tracking logs, cross-referencing accounts, and coordinating with Emily, all without tipping off his parents or Sheila. But Sheila noticed the tension, noticed how he stayed later than usual, how he chewed his lip when something didn't add up. One evening, she confronted him. Craig, what's going on? You can't just disappear for hours and expect nothing to change. He hesitated. It's complicated. But I promise it's not us. It's work. Emily, there's a problem, and I need to help her fix it. She studied him carefully. Craig, if this affects us, I need to know. I don't want to fight a ghost. He took her hands in his. You won't. You're my anchor, Sheila. This is temporary. I'm doing it because I have to, not because I want to leave you. She nodded slowly. Okay, temporary. But don't forget, we're not just standing still while you fight someone else's battles. Craig kissed her then, deep and grounding, a reminder to both of them that, no matter the storms, they were together. The following week, the investigation came to a head. Craig traced the source of the irregular accounts, a former employee at Emily's branch who had tried to cover tracks by routing everything through local servers. Emily handled the legal side. Craig made sure the tech evidence was airtight. When it was over, Emily met him at the same cafe. It's cleared, she said softly. Thanks to you. Craig nodded. Glad it's done. And glad you came to me before it got worse. She smiled faintly. You're still the same Craig Sawyer I used to know. Only stronger. He gave her a small, wry smile. And hopefully wiser. Not that I need to prove anything anymore. She nodded. I think you already did. To yourself. That night, Craig returned to Sheila's. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and pie cooling on the counter. She was waiting, sketchbook forgotten, hands outstretched. You made it, she said, smiling. Yeah, he said, taking her hand. Storm passed. Everything's okay now. She laughed softly. Everything's okay when you're home. He kissed her, long and steady, and felt the weight of the past few months fall away. Emily, the investigation, the shadows of his old life, all of it melted into the background, leaving only this. Sheila, the town, and the life they were building together. For the first time in years, Craig felt completely, irreversibly certain. Some storms test you. Some show you what's worth holding on to. And he wasn't letting go. Chapter 8. Building together. The first hints of winter arrived slowly, dusting the hills with frost and turning the air crisp and clean. Craig's little house, once sparse and impersonal, had started to feel like home. Warm lights in the windows, a faint smell of coffee lingering in the kitchen, and now, Sheila's influence everywhere. Sketches tacked to the fridge, dried flowers in jars, a soft throw blanket on the couch that wasn't his style, but somehow fit perfectly. It was comfortable, complete. And every morning when he opened the blinds to the gray light creeping over the hills, he felt it. This was life, small town, messy, imperfect, and exactly what he wanted. Craig's Saturday mornings had become a routine they both cherished. He and Sheila would wander through the farmer's market, coffee in hand, joking over the same old vendors and sampling cheeses like they were on a culinary tour. He had learned, over time, that their laughter, light, easy, unself-conscious, was the kind of medicine he didn't know he needed. Sheila paused one morning, holding up a bunch of bright yellow tulips. These are for the table, or maybe the windowsill, or maybe just because I like them. Craig grinned. Tulips for no reason are my favorite kind of flowers. She smiled, slipping her hand into his. You've grown into something I didn't even know I wanted. He squeezed her hand. I guess sometimes life surprises you. The real surprise, though, came in the form of Craig's parents. One Sunday evening, after helping them clear out the garage, his mother looked at him with a mischievous glint in her eye. Craig, she said, do you realize you've been here for months? Renting, working, living, and you never mentioned marriage. Craig froze mid-sweep. Marriage? Yes, she said, leaning against the broom. You and Sheila. You're serious, aren't you? He glanced at Sheila, who had been silently watching from the doorway, cheeks slightly pink. She raised her eyebrows, a subtle do-something-about-it look. Craig sighed. Yes, we're serious. His mother clapped her hands, delighted. Well then, it's about time someone put a ring on that finger. Your grandmother would have approved. Craig rubbed the back of his neck. We're not rushing anything. It's just us right now. You're a fool, his father said with a smile. But a happy one. That counts for something. Sheila laughed softly, stepping closer. We're happy, yes. And the thought of rushing just because of tradition? Not our style. Good, his mom said. Just don't wait too long. Life has a way of moving faster than you think. Craig watched Sheila smile at him, a soft warmth in her eyes, and felt something he hadn't realized was missing until now. Certainty. Not the certainty of routine, or safety, or even comfort, but the certainty of being seen, understood, and wanted without conditions. A week later, they were sitting in Craig's living room, the low hum of the heater filling the quiet. Sheila leaned back, legs curled beneath her, sketchbook in her lap. I was thinking, she said slowly, about us, about everything we've built here, about the life we're living. Craig tilted his head. Yeah. She set her pencil down. I know you're not the kind to jump into things without thinking, but do you ever think about the future? Craig leaned back, hands resting on his knees. All the time, but not the city lights kind of future. The kind with quiet mornings, messy kitchens, friends dropping by unexpectedly, and you. That kind. She smiled, a little shy now. You really mean that? Every word. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You're going to make me cry if you keep talking like that. Good, he said with a grin. Then you'll know how serious I am. By late December, the town had fully shifted into its holiday rhythm. Lights lined the streets, the scent of baked goods and pine hung in the air, and Craig and Sheila had taken over part of the living room as their planning corner, a place for lists, calendars, and daydreams about the future. Craig had spent hours debating with himself about the next step. He wanted it to be thoughtful, meaningful, something that showed not just commitment, but understanding of what they had survived together. One evening, Sheila arrived at his place to find him sitting on the floor, a small box in his hands, nervous and deliberate. You look serious, she said, setting down her bag. I am, he admitted, standing up slowly. I've been thinking a lot. About us. About the life we're building. And I realized something. Her eyes softened, waiting. I don't want to wait, he said, voice steady. Not because we need to. Not because anyone else thinks it's time. I want to be with you, Sheila. Officially. Publicly. And I want to ask you. He got down on one knee, pulling the small box from his pocket and opening it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Sheila's hands flew to her mouth, eyes wide. Craig, I know life hasn't been simple. It hasn't been easy, but it's been real. And I want to keep it that way. With you. Forever. Will you marry me? Tears threatened to spill over as she nodded, voice breaking. Yes. Of course yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and they stayed there, holding each other, feeling the warmth of certainty, love, and hard-earned trust wrap around them like a blanket. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of joy and planning. Friends from town pitched in to help them with invitations. The local bakery volunteered for tastings, and even Craig's parents offered to host a small rehearsal dinner. Small-town gossip flew, but it was the good kind, the kind that made Craig laugh rather than stress. Through it all, Craig realized something vital. Love, like life, wasn't about avoiding storms. It was about finding someone willing to stand beside you when the clouds gather, to laugh with you in the sun, and to keep building even when the path isn't clear. Sheila became his anchor, his cheerleader, his partner in every sense. And he became hers, steady, reliable, willing to fight for the life they were building together. One evening, a few weeks before the wedding, they sat by the fire in Craig's living room, Sheila sketching and Craig reading. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon, pine, and the comforting smoke of the fireplace. I can't believe this is real, she said softly, looking up from her sketchbook. What is, he asked. This. Us. All of it. We've built a life, Craig. And now, we're building a future. He smiled, reaching over to brush a strand of hair from her face. We didn't just survive the storms. We learned how to weather them together. She leaned into his hand. I love you, Craig. I love what we are. I love you too, he whispered. And I promise, no matter what comes next, we face it together. She smiled, resting her forehead against his. Outside, the wind howled around the house, the world busy and chaotic. But inside, there was only warmth, love, and the quiet knowledge that the hardest choices had led them here, to each other, finally, fully, and without reservation. Chapter 9, Shadows Before the Aisle. Craig had never thought of small towns as dramatic, until wedding planning came along. It started innocently enough. Invitations had gone out, decorations were ordered, and the town's bakery had promised the best pie and cake combo in the county. Life should have been simple, perfect even. Instead, it felt like every neighbor, cousin, and former classmate suddenly had opinions. Craig, honey, his Aunt Marge said over coffee one morning, frowning at the stack of RSVP cards. I just don't understand why you're not having a huge church wedding. The town will talk. Craig blinked. Marge, we are having a wedding. It's just smaller. Intimate. Marge tooted. Small? You're getting married. People expect a spectacle. Don't you care what they think? Sheila shot Craig a look across the table, the kind that said, don't engage, just smile. Craig smiled. We care more about the people who matter than the people who gossip. Trust me. Marge huffed, muttering something about young people these days. That night, Craig and Sheila sat on the couch, both tired from errands, RSVPs, and decorations. You think it's going to get worse? Sheila asked, tossing her knitting onto the floor. Craig shrugged. It's small town life. People notice everything, and then they judge everything. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Well, we can't control that. We can only control us. I hate that it's already starting before the wedding even happens, he admitted. Sheila smiled faintly. We've survived worse. Trust me, Craig Sawyer. A little unsolicited advice won't break us. The real test came 2 weeks later. Craig's phone buzzed during a work call. He glanced down. Unknown number. Emily, can we meet? Urgent. His stomach sank. He excused himself, stepping outside to call her back. Craig, is everything okay? Sheila asked, sensing the tension. Yeah, it's work-related, he said quickly, trying to keep his voice steady. But even as he said it, he realized how fragile the pre-wedding calm was. Emily met him at a quiet diner, avoiding attention. Her expression was serious, the easy warmth from months ago replaced by something urgent. There's a problem, she said immediately, sliding a folder across the table. Someone has accessed sensitive telecom data, again, and it's been traced to your network region. Craig sighed. I thought we cleared all of this last year. You did, Emily said. But someone smart, careful, and familiar with the systems. We need your help before this escalates. Craig nodded slowly, the weight of responsibility pressing down. Fine. Show me everything. When he returned home, Sheila was waiting in the kitchen, stirring soup. Everything okay? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Craig hesitated. It's complicated. Emily needs my help again. It's technical, but serious. Sheila put the spoon down and studied him. So what does that mean? It means I'll be busy for the next few days. It's urgent. But it doesn't change us, he said, taking her hands. She smiled faintly, squeezing his hands back. Just don't let it take over everything. I want this wedding to actually happen, not get derailed by ghosts of your past. Craig kissed her softly. Nothing will stop us. Not now. The next morning brought another surprise. Craig's sister, Beth, appeared at his door, unannounced, arms crossed, expression stormy. You two are engaged? She asked bluntly. Yes, Sheila said, stepping beside him, calm and steady. Beth's eyes narrowed. And you're okay with a small wedding? I heard Marge gossiping, and now I'm hearing that half the town is already complaining. Craig sighed. We're okay with what we want. That's what matters. Beth shook her head. Just promise me you'll not let everyone else's drama ruin it. I've seen you both survive a lot, but weddings bring out the worst. Sheila smiled softly. We'll be fine. We've survived worse. Beth softened. Good. Just don't forget who's standing beside you. And Craig, protect Sheila. She's amazing. Craig nodded. Always. Beth hugged Sheila, muttering, I hope you know what you're getting into with him, and left, leaving them both laughing quietly at her dramatic flair. By the end of the week, Craig found himself juggling work emergencies, Emily's investigation updates, and last-minute wedding decisions. Stress was mounting, and even small things felt bigger. One evening, as he reviewed flower arrangements and catering notes, Sheila came into his office with a mischievous grin. You've been glued to that laptop all day, she said, walking behind his chair to rest her chin on his shoulder. I'm trying to keep everything under control, he muttered. Sheila laughed softly. You're impossible. She leaned closer. You need a break. Come with me. Just for an hour. He hesitated. I can't. Not tonight. Yes, you can, she said firmly, tugging his arm. I promise it'll be worth it. Craig finally relented, leaving his notes behind. They walked to the small frozen pond near town, where the ice had just formed enough for casual skating. At first, Craig was stiff, cautious, but Sheila held his hands, guiding him. They laughed, stumbled, and spun in circles, the stress of the week melting with every wobble. See, she said, breathless from laughter. Not everything has to be serious. Craig laughed, the tension leaving his shoulders. You're right. I needed this more than I realized. They stopped at the edge of the pond, icy wind blowing red into their cheeks. Sheila looked up at him, eyes shining. You know, she whispered, whatever comes next, the wedding, the town, even the drama, we'll handle it. Together. Craig nodded, pulling her close. Together. Always. The final test arrived the next morning. Craig's father called, his voice cautious. Craig, I just wanted to mention something about the wedding. Your mother and I were thinking, maybe you should invite a few more people from the city. You know, colleagues, old friends. It might be polite. Craig frowned. Dad, it's small for a reason. We don't want it crowded. I know, his father said quickly. I just don't want you to have regrets. Craig took a deep breath. I appreciate that. But this is our day, not anyone else's. His father was silent for a moment, then said, All right, son. Just make sure it's what you want. I will, Craig said, smiling. After hanging up, he leaned back in his chair, looking out at the frost-covered yard. He felt the weight of expectations, family, town, work, pressing on him. But he also felt Sheila's presence in every choice he'd made, every laugh, every quiet glance they'd shared. He realized something. Weddings were messy, life was messy, and people would always try to push their opinions into your story. But the real test wasn't avoiding the storm. It was standing in the middle of it with someone who loved you, holding steady, refusing to let go. That night, Craig and Sheila sat by the fireplace, reviewing the final details. You know, Sheila said softly, tracing circles on his hand. A small-town wedding isn't about grandeur. It's about the people who actually matter. And I can't imagine standing here with anyone but you. Craig smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I feel the same way. No matter what comes at us, family drama, gossip, work stress, we've got each other. That's what counts. She leaned into him. Promise me we'll always handle life like this. Together. I promise, he whispered. Outside, the wind rattled the old window panes, carrying the faint sound of distant laughter and town chatter. Inside, there was warmth, quiet certainty, and the steady rhythm of two people who had survived storms and were ready to face the ones yet to come. Together. Chapter 10. The wedding day. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and clear, the sun spilling over frost-dusted rooftops and reflecting off the sleepy town streets. Craig woke early, a rare calm settling over him as he brewed his coffee and listened to the faint sounds of life stirring outside. For once, there was no doubt. No second-guessing. No lingering shadows. Today was the day. Sheila was already bustling in her parents' kitchen, the smell of fresh-baked pastries mingling with faint perfume. She hummed softly as she double-checked ribbons, bows, and the carefully arranged bouquets. Craig arrived, dressed sharply but comfortably in his suit, carrying a small box with a gift he had prepared for her. You look amazing, he said quietly, setting the box on the counter. Sheila turned, her eyes lighting up. Craig, you didn't have to bring me anything. He smiled softly. Just a little something. Open it after the ceremony. She kissed him on the cheek, a mixture of nerves and excitement bubbling beneath her calm exterior. I can't believe today's finally here. Me neither, he said. But I can't imagine doing this with anyone else. The ceremony was set at the edge of town, in the park by the frozen lake where they had shared countless moments, laughter, quiet conversations, first kisses, and late-night revelations. The benches were lined with friends and family, scarves and coats tucked around shoulders, and even a few curious neighbors who had to witness the union of the town's beloved couple, as one gossiping cousin had phrased it. Craig stood at the makeshift altar, hands clasped, trying to ignore the faint tremor in his stomach. Beside him, his best man, an old friend from childhood, gave him a reassuring nod. He looked down the aisle as the music began, and there she was, Sheila, wrapped in her coat at first, but as she stepped closer, the coat fell away, revealing her dress, simple, elegant, and perfect in every way. Her hair, strawberry blonde as ever, caught the sunlight in gentle waves, and her eyes met his with that calm, unwavering certainty he had come to love. Time slowed. The ceremony began, and the officiant's words floated over them. Craig's heart beat steadily now, no fear, only certainty. When it came time for vows, he stepped forward, clearing his throat. Sheila, he began, voice steady. From the first moment we reconnected, you've been my anchor, my guide, and my best friend. You've taught me patience, laughter, and the strength it takes to love someone fully. Today, I promise to stand beside you through storms and sunlight alike, to laugh with you, support you, and build a life together. I promise to love you fiercely, every day, for all the days we have. Her eyes glistened as she took his hands. Craig, from the moment you came back into my life, you've made me feel seen, understood, and safe. You've taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's action, trust, and partnership. Today, I promise to be your partner in every sense, to celebrate the small moments, face the challenges, and laugh through everything life throws at us. I promise to love you fully, without hesitation, for all the days we share. They exchanged rings, simple bands that fit perfectly, a symbol of everything they had endured and everything they were building together. Just as the officiant declared them husband and wife, a gust of wind swept across the lake, knocking a few loose hats from heads and causing Sheila to laugh, clutching Craig's arm. Welcome to the world, Mr. and Mrs. Sawyer, the officiant said with a grin. The first kiss as a married couple was met with cheers, laughter, and a few playful hoots from friends who had been waiting years for this moment. Craig held Sheila tightly, letting the warmth of her body, her heartbeat, and her smile imprint into memory. The reception was in the town hall, decorated with fairy lights, simple flowers, and a mix of old town charm with personal touches. Craig and Sheila danced their first dance to a slow, familiar tune, surrounded by family and friends. Craig looked into Sheila's eyes as they swayed. "I can't believe this is real," he whispered. "It is," she said softly. "And it's ours. Every bit of it. But, of course, no wedding in a small town would be without its chaos." The cake toppled slightly when a toddler ran past, shoving a chair into the table. A neighbor's dog, apparently invited by mistake, wandered into the hall, causing mild panic. Craig's cousin Marge tried to correct the seating arrangement mid-reception, loudly muttering about proper etiquette. Sheila laughed through it all, pulling Craig close. "See? Chaos makes life interesting." Craig smiled, shaking his head. "I'll take chaos with you over perfection with anyone else." Later, after the dinner plates were cleared and the last songs played, Craig pulled Sheila onto the balcony overlooking the park. The wind was colder now, but they didn't care. "You know," he said, wrapping his arms around her, "I thought small-town life would be boring. Predictable. Safe." She smiled, resting her head on his chest. And I was wrong. Life here is loud, messy, funny, and perfect because of you." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the lights from the hall. "Craig, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." "Me neither," he said. It's real, and nothing will change that." She laughed softly. "Even town gossip? Even that," he said, kissing her forehead. As they stood there, hand in hand, the past felt like a distant shadow. Emily, the investigations, the storms they had weathered. All of it had led to this: certainty, love, and the quiet knowledge that no matter what came next, they had each other. Craig squeezed her hand. "Shall we go back in? Our life is waiting." Sheila nodded, smiling. Together, they re-entered the hall, greeted by cheers and laughter, ready to face the future. Messy, unpredictable, and wonderful, side by side. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall, dusting the rooftops, the frozen lake, and the streets of the little town. Craig looked at Sheila, laughing as she twirled in the falling snow, and felt something he hadn't realized he'd been missing: peace. Not the peace of perfection, but the peace of knowing that together, they could handle anything. And for the first time in years, Craig Sawyer felt like he had finally arrived home. Chapter 11. Settling in. The first morning after the honeymoon was quiet, almost uncomfortably so. Craig woke to the faint smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Sheila was humming softly as she moved around, unpacking groceries they had decided to tackle before the day got away from them. Craig stretched, running a hand through his hair, and watched her. It was a small, domestic moment, the kind he had never imagined would bring so much comfort. "Morning," she said, smiling without looking up. "Morning," he replied, making his way to the counter. "Coffee." She nodded. "2 cups. Black for you, with a little sugar for me." Craig poured his, the silence between them soft but filled with a shared understanding. This, the quiet rhythm of mornings, the unspoken teamwork, the comfort of just being near each other, was part of the reality of marriage. Not glamorous, not perfect, but real. By mid-morning, the reality of living together had begun to assert itself. Craig attempted to do laundry, misreading the symbols on a few garments, which resulted in a pink sweater that was supposed to be white. Sheila walked in, hands on her hips. "Craig, I told you cold wash for whites. Well, let's just call it blushing chic." Craig held up the sweater, feigning pride. "It's fashion-forward?" Sheila laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." He grinned. "I know. That's why you married me." She swatted him playfully, though the corners of her mouth betrayed a smile. "I regret nothing." Adjusting to the small routines of marriage also meant compromise. Craig had grown used to leaving dishes in the sink for a day or two. Sheila insisted on a strict, wash-as-you-go policy. Craig had a morning habit of reading the news at breakfast. Sheila preferred silence until her coffee had kicked in. But the challenges weren't monumental, just small, persistent tests of patience and communication. By the end of the first week, Craig realized that marriage wasn't about avoiding these little conflicts. It was about navigating them together, sometimes laughing, sometimes groaning, but always choosing each other in the process. Work presented its own set of complications. Craig continued his remote telecom job, occasionally visiting sites for maintenance and troubleshooting. Some days meant long hours, tech emergencies, or sudden travel to neighboring towns. Sheila, meanwhile, continued her art and freelance design work. One Wednesday, Craig came home exhausted from a particularly grueling day, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "Rough day?" Sheila asked, looking up from her sketches. "You have no idea," he admitted, dropping onto the couch. Emily called again, some new issue with the network, and the site visit was a disaster. Equipment failures everywhere. Sheila set her pencil down and sat beside him. "So what's the plan?" "I'll handle it," he said, sighing. "But I don't want to bring the stress home." "You won't," she said softly. "But you can bring yourself home. I'll handle the stress part." Craig smiled faintly, leaning back, letting her presence ease the tension. This was the rhythm they were learning. Life would throw chaos at them, but together, it was manageable. Evenings became their sanctuary. They cooked together, debated music playlists, and debated whose turn it was to clean the kitchen. Laughter became the glue that held the small annoyances in check. One Friday, Sheila decided to surprise Craig by recreating a mini pizza night from one of their first dates together. She had the dough ready, toppings laid out, and even a small bottle of sparkling juice. Craig walked into the kitchen, eyes wide. "You didn't." "I did," she said with a grin. "It's our life now, Craig. Fun doesn't stop because you're married." They laughed as dough flew, sauce dripped, and the oven occasionally threatened to flare. By the time the pizzas were done, their clothes were stained with flour, and the kitchen looked like a war zone. Craig looked at her, covered in flour, eyes sparkling, and knew this, all of it, was exactly what he wanted. A more serious challenge came unexpectedly one Saturday. Sheila's art client had requested a last-minute redesign, and the deadline was tight. Craig had a scheduled maintenance visit in the next town. Both were stressed, juggling responsibilities, and miscommunication led to a minor argument in the living room. "You promised you'd help me organize the sketches." Sheila snapped, frustration rising. "I did, but I also have work." Craig fired back. Silence fell heavy between them. Then, Craig stopped, exhaling slowly. "Look, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have snapped. We're both stressed, but that doesn't mean we should fight." Sheila's shoulders relaxed. "You're right. I just wanted to get it done, and I forgot we're a team." Craig took her hand. "Always. Team Sawyer." They laughed softly, tension broken, and settled into the quiet understanding that marriage didn't erase conflict. It demanded communication, compromise, and forgiveness. By midwinter, they had established routines that worked. Mornings with coffee, evenings cooking or sketching together, weekends for walks or errands, and occasional nights out with friends from town. Craig's parents continued to visit often, offering advice or casual interference. Marge with her endless opinions, his father with quiet commentary. But both Craig and Sheila had learned to manage it gracefully. One evening, after a particularly hectic week of site visits and client deadlines, Craig and Sheila sat in the living room, exhausted but content. "You know," Sheila said, leaning against him, "I didn't realize how much life changes when you move in with someone. But it's better than I imagined, even with the chaos." Craig kissed her hair softly. "Better than I imagined too. And somehow, I feel like we've survived everything life could throw at us already." "Not everything," she teased, "but enough to know we can handle it." "Exactly," he said, smiling. "And whatever comes next, we handle it together." The real test came on New Year's Eve. Craig had been called in for an emergency site repair in the neighboring town, arriving home just before midnight. Sheila had prepared a small, intimate celebration, just the two of them, champagne, and a playlist of their favorite songs. Craig rushed in, breathless, but the sight of her standing by the fire, smiling, waiting for him, melted every ounce of stress from his shoulders. "You made it," she said softly. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," he said, pulling her into his arms. They toasted the new year quietly, holding each other, whispering promises, and laughing at their clumsy attempt to dance in the living room. At midnight, as the clock chimed, Craig whispered in Sheila's ear, "This is it. Our life. New year, same team." Sheila smiled, pressing her forehead to his. "Always." By the end of the first months of married life, Craig realized a profound truth. Love wasn't just about the big gestures or dramatic moments. It was in the ordinary, the spilled coffee, the burnt toast, the flower fights, the shared laughter, the small apologies. It was in the unglamorous, messy, daily life that they were building together. And in that chaos, Craig found a peace he had never known in the city, in ambition, or even in past heartbreak. He had Sheila, he had home, and he had the certainty that, no matter what came next, they would face it together. The first months of marriage weren't perfect, but they were theirs, full of love, laughter, challenges, and triumphs. And that was more than enough. Chapter 12. Cracks in the ice. Winter had fully settled into the town, blanketing the streets and rooftops in a soft layer of snow. Craig and Sheila's home felt warm and cozy in contrast. Fire crackling, lights twinkling, and the faint smell of fresh bread wafting from the oven. Life, on the surface, was exactly as they wanted it. Peaceful, rhythmic, and full of small joys. Yet, as Craig had learned over the years, peace rarely stayed uninterrupted for long. It started with a letter, a formal envelope, embossed with the logo of the telecommunications company Craig worked for. He recognized the corporate letterhead immediately and frowned as he opened it. "Craig," Sheila called from the kitchen. He cleared his throat, scanning the contents. "It's complicated. It's from work, something about a compliance issue flagged in the system." Sheila walked over, leaning on the counter. "What kind of issue?" "Apparently, someone reported irregular activity on one of the networks I manage. They think someone on our team is bypassing protocol, and the auditors want me to verify everything." Sheila frowned. "Are you being accused of anything?" Craig shook his head. "No, but I have to prove it. And the problem is someone could be lying, covering mistakes, or worse. I'll have to dig through months of records." Sheila placed her hand on his shoulder. "You'll figure it out. You always do." Craig gave her a small, wry smile, appreciating her confidence, but feeling the knot of worry tightening in his chest. This was no minor technical glitch. If mishandled, it could affect his career, reputation, and possibly the stability they had built together. The next few days were a whirlwind. Craig worked late into the night, poring over logs, cross-referencing site visits, and reaching out to colleagues for verification. Sheila tried to keep their home routine intact, preparing meals, maintaining warmth, and offering emotional support. But even she noticed the tension in his posture, the slight edge in his voice. One evening, After a long day at the office and a particularly frustrating round of data reconciliation, Craig slammed his laptop shut. I can't find anything wrong, he muttered, pacing. Everything checks out, but they're insisting someone tampered with the network. Sheila followed him, gently resting her hands on his arms. Craig, breathing helps. You can't solve it by pacing alone. He rubbed his face, exhausted. I know, but what if they're wrong? What if someone is lying and I can't prove it? Sheila looked him in the eyes, unwavering. Then we deal with it together. You're not alone in this, remember? Her words were a lifeline, but Craig couldn't shake the gnawing fear that their carefully balanced life was about to tip. The real complication came the following morning. Emily, whose presence had faded into background stability after their wedding, appeared in Craig's office unexpectedly. Craig, we have a problem, she said, holding a tablet with audit logs displayed. I traced the irregular activity to one of your regional teams. Someone's been creating fake service reports to cover errors. The thing is, it's not malicious, but it looks bad on paper. Really bad. Craig leaned back, running a hand over his face. Great. So someone's incompetent, but I have to take the fall for it. Emily shook her head. No, you just have to prove the truth. You'll need evidence, time-stamped records, and confirmation from multiple sources. And yes, your company might look closely at your work in the meantime. Craig exhaled slowly. Of course, just another day in paradise. Back at home, Sheila noticed the strain deepening. Craig no longer had time for small walks or coffee breaks. Evenings that had been sacred, cooking, laughter, quiet conversation, were replaced with spreadsheets, audit logs, and frustrated pacing. One night, Sheila confronted him. Craig, I get it. Work is important, but so is us. If this keeps up, we'll lose everything we've built at home. You can't burn yourself out. Craig looked at her, weary and worn. I can't ignore it, Sheila. If I don't handle this, someone else could get hurt, and I can't let that happen. I promise to protect this life, all of it. I'm just stretched too thin. Sheila took his hands, firm but gentle. You're human. You don't have to carry it all alone. Let me help, emotionally, logistically, whatever you need. But don't shut me out. Craig nodded, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. I know. I just don't want to mess up. Not now. Not ever. Sheila kissed his forehead. Then trust me. We'll get through this. Together. The days blurred into long nights. Craig meticulously documented everything, contacting colleagues, collecting evidence, and preparing reports. Sheila adjusted her schedule, helping with record keeping and keeping him grounded. Their home became a war room of notebooks, printed logs, and post-it notes. And yet, despite the stress, they leaned on each other more than ever. Every small victory, a confirmed report, a verified timestamp, a supportive coworker, was celebrated. Every setback, a delayed response, a confusing error, a false alarm, was handled together. It was exhausting, yes, but it was also a reminder of what marriage meant: partnership, trust, and shared responsibility. Then, one Friday, just as the town's first full snowstorm of the season hit, Craig uncovered the truth. One of the junior technicians had been sloppy, creating duplicate service entries to cover mistakes. The logs had appeared suspicious, but there was no malicious intent. With Emily's help, Craig compiled the proof, creating a clear timeline that exonerated him and clarified the errors. He called Sheila as he closed his laptop, snow drifting lazily outside the window. Sheila, he said, voice tired but triumphant. It's done. We cleared everything. No fallout. Just incompetent junior mistakes. Sheila laughed, relief flooding her tone. So, life is safe again. And you survived another storm. Craig smiled, letting the weight finally lift. We survived. Together. She pressed her forehead to his. Always. That night, as the storm raged outside, Craig and Sheila sat in front of the fireplace, sipping cocoa and watching the snow blanket their small town. You know, Craig said softly, I thought this challenge would break me. Or us. But somehow, it just made me realize how strong we are together. Sheila smiled, leaning against him. I knew it all along. Storms are inevitable. It's how you weather them that matters. Craig wrapped an arm around her, the warmth from the fire and her presence seeping into his bones. Then let's face the rest of life like this. Side by side. Side by side, she echoed. And for the first time in weeks, Craig felt complete peace. The work problems, the corporate scrutiny, the snowstorm outside, none of it mattered when they were together. They had weathered the first major test of married life and emerged stronger, more connected, and more certain than ever that their partnership was built to last. Outside, the town lay quiet under a soft blanket of snow. Inside, Craig and Sheila's home was alive with warmth, laughter, and the knowledge that whatever life threw at them next, they would face it hand in hand. Epilogue. Together, always, the storm had passed. Literally and figuratively. The snow had melted into muddy spring streets, leaving the small town glistening under pale sunlight. Craig and Sheila's home, once filled with the tension of work crises and looming shadows, now hummed with quiet warmth. They sat together on the couch, mugs of coffee in hand, shoulders brushing, watching the morning light spill across their living room. You know, Sheila said softly, I never thought I'd feel this settled. This, content. Craig smiled, tilting his head to rest against hers. Me neither. After everything we've been through, the city, the heartbreaks, the chaos at work, this feels like home. Not just the town, not just the house, but you. Sheila laughed softly. I could say the same. We've built something solid, haven't we? Craig nodded. Stronger than anything I've ever known. We've faced storms, together. And that's the only thing that matters. She leaned into him, their hands entwined. No matter what comes next. No matter what, he said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Side by side. Always. The sunlight shifted, painting gold over the familiar clutter of their home. Books, sketches, and the small reminders of life they had carved out together. Outside, the town bustled quietly, unaware of the quiet victories inside their walls. But inside, Craig and Sheila knew something the world could never take. They had each other, and together, they were unshakable. And for the first time in a long while, Craig Sawyer felt truly at peace. The past, the heartbreak, the betrayals, the small-town chaos, all of it had led here. To this warmth, this love, this life built from trust, patience, and shared laughter. They had survived storms before, and they would survive them again. But for now, for this moment, there was only the quiet certainty of love, partnership, and the promise of tomorrow. Together. Always. The end.